The colony's last stand. The colony on Arcadia had once been a symbol of humanity's reach beyond Earth. Thriving in the farthest corners of the galaxy for years, the humans had lived in peace, building cities that blended technology with nature, creating a home that felt safe and prosperous. But that peace was shattered in an instant. As a shadow fell across the colony, an unknown enemy that arrived without warning. General Zoran stood on the command deck of the Exodus, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. He had received the message just hours ago, a transmission from the colony. An urgent distress signal that was cut off midway. The colony, located on the edge of human-controlled space, had never seen a threat of this magnitude. They had always been isolated, left alone to grow and thrive. But now, something had changed. Something deadly was on their doorstep. Zoran's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his communications officer. General, we've received a second signal from Arcadia 4. It's fragmented, but it's clear the colony has been attacked. They're being overrun. By who? Zoran demanded, his voice harsh. The officer's face remained stoic as he read the data. We don't know, sir. The signal mentions an alien force, a species we've never encountered. It's not just an attack, it's a complete annihilation. They're using weapons we've never seen before. Zoran's heart sank. He had trained for battles, for conflicts that would challenge humanity, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for Earth's very future. Send the coordinates of the attack. We're heading to Arcadia 4, Zoran ordered, his voice filled with resolve. Back on Arcadia 4, the situation was even worse than Zoran had imagined. Colonel Carter, the leader of the colony's defense forces, stood at the command center, his face grim as he watched the view screens flicker with images of the devastation. Outside the windows of the station, the bright blue sky had turned into an ominous red as massive ships hovered above the planet, their weapons firing relentlessly. The unknown enemy had launched a full-scale assault, bombarding the colony from all angles. We're not going to make it, Carter muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Harris. The young officer looked back at him, his face pale but resolute. We have to hold them off. If we can just delay them long enough, the Exodus will arrive with reinforcements. We just have to survive a little longer, Carter nodded. But even he wasn't sure how much longer they could last. The enemy had already taken out their outer defenses, and the main city was in flames. The last line of defense, the human fleet, was millions of miles away. It was too late to call for help. They had to rely on their own strength. Deploy the last wave of fighters. If we're going down, we're going down fighting. On the surface of Arcadia 4, the human defenders mounted a last-ditch effort to protect the colony. Fighter jets launched from their underground bunkers, flying into the sky to intercept the enemy ships. But no matter how many enemy ships they destroyed, more came. The unknown aliens were relentless, their ships vast, dark, and unstoppable. As the battle raged in the sky, Colonel Carter and his team had taken shelter in the command bunker. Surrounded by a few remaining soldiers, he looked at his men, each one with fear in their eyes. But none of them backed down. They were soldiers trained to protect, trained to fight. It was all they had left. One of the soldiers, Private Daniels, looked up from his console. Sir, we've detected something. It's coming from space, an energy signature. Carter frowned. Is it reinforcements? Daniels shook his head. No, sir, it's not from any human ship. But it's huge. For a moment, everyone in the room froze. Could it be help, or was it just another wave of the enemy? Just then, the ground beneath them shook violently. A massive explosion rocked the command bunker, sending debris falling from the ceiling. The walls rattled, and Carter had to hold onto a nearby desk to stay steady. It's happening, Carter whispered. The Exodus was still too far away, and the enemy was closing in fast. Their weapons had already begun to tear through the outer walls of the bunker. It would only be a matter of time before the entire colony was lost. As the human fleet aboard the Exodus finally received the signal from Arcadia 4, they were already on the move, racing toward the colony's coordinates. Zoran stood at the front of the Exodus's command center, his eyes locked on the navigation screen. The colony's destruction was imminent, but he refused to accept it. They had to make it in time. Prepare for hyperspace jump, Zoran commanded, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. The crew worked quickly, and the Exodus hummed with the power of its engines. The time for strategizing was over. They had to get there fast. As they launched into hyperspace, Zoran couldn't help but wonder if they would make it in time to save the colony, or if humanity was about to lose its first great fight on Arcadia 4. The enemy was relentless. Carter and his team fought valiantly, but their weapons were no match for the alien forces. The last human fighter jets were being shot down one by one, and the colony's last hope seemed to be fading. The once prosperous world now lay in ruin, its cities burning, its people in hiding. As the enemy forces breached the final defense line, Carter's voice rang out across the radio. "This is Colonel Carter, commanding officer of Arcadia 4. We've held them off as long as we could, to General Zoran, to the rest of the human fleet. We've given everything we have," but just as Carter's message went silent, the sky above them lit up with an explosive burst of light. A massive warship, the Exodus, had arrived, cutting through the enemy's forces with a sudden and devastating blast. Humanity's last line of defense had arrived and they were ready to fight. Humanity's counterattack. The explosion of light in the distance was like a sign of salvation. Humanity's last hope. As the Exodus emerged from hyperspace, it tore through the battlefield like a vengeful titan, its weapons charging up, ready to strike. The Revenants had believed they were on the brink of victory, their ships overrunning the colony with terrifying efficiency, but now they were faced with something they had not expected: humanity's response. The Exodus, the pride of Earth's fleet, was here, and it was armed with power the Revenants had never anticipated. General Zoran stood at the helm of the Exodus, his hands steady on the controls. The enormity of the situation wasn't lost on him. The battle that raged below, the destruction of the human colony, it all led to this one pivotal moment. The Revenants had attacked Earth's most vulnerable colony, thinking they could crush humanity with ease. But they had underestimated the power of the ley line energy, which had been harnessed by Earth in secret. Humanity had awakened, and now it was time to show the galaxy what they were capable of. "Captain Dorsey, get us into the heart of their fleet," Zoran commanded, his voice sharp and full of purpose. The time for hesitation was over. The Exodus had arrived, and the galaxy would soon know the price of attacking humanity. "We need to hit them hard, right at their core," Captain Dorsey, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the control panels, nodded without hesitation. "Aye, General, all systems are ready. We'll make them regret underestimating us." The Exodus surged forward, its weapons glowing with the energy that had been harnessed from the very core of the planet. Zoran knew the battle would be fierce. The Revenants' fleet was large, and their forces were relentless. But humanity was no longer just a fledgling species. The ley lines had given Earth an edge of power unlike any they had ever seen before. On the surface of Arcadia 4, the Revenants were still closing in. Their ships, sleek and menacing, had broken through the colony's final defenses. The human fighters had fought bravely, but they were no match for the alien firepower. Now, only a handful of soldiers remained, huddled in the last defense bunkers, praying for salvation. Colonel Carter, standing with his back to the battle-damaged walls of the command center, looked at his team with determination. "We're not giving up. Help is on the way. We just have to hold them off a little longer." But as Carter's voice echoed in the bunker, the ground beneath them rumbled. They could hear the distant hum of massive engines, a sound unlike anything they'd ever heard before. The Exodus had arrived. And it wasn't just another ship, it was a force of nature, cutting through the chaos like a knife. A soldier, his eyes wide with shock, looked through the battered windows. "Sir, look at the sky. It's the Exodus. We're going to make it." The Revenants didn't know what hit them. As the Exodus opened fire, their ships were torn apart, the ley line enhanced weaponry ripping through the alien armor. The Revenants had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. Back on the Exodus, General Zoran's eyes never left the view screen. The battle was far from won, but humanity had made its first strong statement. As the Revenants' fleet scrambled to regroup, Zoran knew they had to keep the pressure on. They couldn't afford to give the enemy time to adapt or retaliate. This was humanity's moment to strike, and they had to make it count. "General," Captain Dorsey's voice broke through the tension, "the Revenants' flagship, it's retreating. We've forced them into a corner." Zoran's jaw tightened. The flagship of the Revenants was their most formidable asset, their ultimate weapon. If they were retreating, that meant humanity was winning. But the battle was far from over. The Revenants were a resourceful enemy. They would never simply give up. "We can't let them escape," Zoran said, his voice steely. "We'll pursue. We end this now." The Exodus pushed forward, now focusing all their firepower on the Revenants' flagship. The alien ship, large and imposing, had once been a symbol of their dominance in the galaxy, but now it was nothing more than a target, and humanity's forces weren't going to let it escape. The Revenants began to fire back with all their remaining strength, but their resistance was crumbling. The human fleet, powered by the ley lines, was unstoppable. And as the Exodus closed in on the flagship, a final barrage of energy surged from the human ship. The Revenant's flagship shuddered under the assault, its hull cracking under the pressure. The crew aboard the Exodus knew the victory was in their grasp. Zoran's fingers clenched around the control panel as the final blow struck the flagship. The alien ship exploded in a massive fireball, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The human fleet stood victorious, The unexpected retreat aftermath of the battle was both exhilarating and unsettling. The Exodus and its fleet had achieved a victory, one that humanity had desperately needed. The Revenant's flagship was reduced to nothing more than a burning wreck in the void of space. But as the enemy fleet scattered and retreated, a strange quiet settled over the battlefield, one that left General Zoran with a heavy feeling in his chest. He stood at the command deck of the Exodus, staring out at the scattered debris from the Revenant's fleet. The human fleet had done its job, and the Revenants had been forced to pull back. But it didn't feel like the victory it should have been. There was a deep sense of unease in Zoran's gut. Something didn't feel right. The Revenants had fought fiercely. But their retreat was not one of complete defeat. They had been forced to fall back, but Zoran couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end. There was something about the way they had retreated. It was too organized, too strategic. Zoran knew that if they didn't press forward, the Revenants would regroup and come back even stronger. General, Captain Dorsey's voice cut through his thoughts. I've been tracking their movements. The Revenants are pulling back, but they're not just retreating blindly. They've activated their emergency war protocols, they're reorganizing. And they're heading back to their stronghold. Zoran's eyes narrowed. They're not done, they're planning something bigger. Dorsey nodded. I agree, sir, we've dealt a major blow. But this isn't the end of the war. The Revenants are a force that doesn't retreat without reason. They'll return, and when they do, they'll have more than just ships at their disposal. We need to be ready. Zoran stood in silence for a moment, contemplating their next move. He knew the Revenants were powerful, but now that they had faced humanity's might head-on, he also knew that humanity had the strength to match them. The Revenants' empire had been built on fear and destruction, but humanity had something they had never seen before. Resolve. Prepare the fleet, Zoran said, his voice steady. We've won this battle, but the war is far from over. We will not let the Revenants take this galaxy without a fight. Earth has just begun to rise. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Revenants' retreat did little to ease the unease among humanity's leaders. Dr. Calloway, still overseeing the operation to harness the ley line energy, had felt the increasing power of the ancient force beneath Earth's surface. The alien power source humanity had discovered was now a symbol of both hope and danger. While it had provided humanity with an edge, it was still unstable, and its effects on Earth's ecosystem were unpredictable. Dr. Calloway, the ley line power is fluctuating, one of the technicians said, breaking his concentration. The energy output is increasing. We're running out of time. Calloway frowned, his mind racing. The ley lines had given humanity strength, but they hadn't yet fully understood the consequences of tapping into this force. It was an ancient energy, older than most of the galaxy's civilizations, and humanity had only begun to scrape the surface of its potential. We need to stabilize it, or it could destroy everything we worked for, Calloway muttered, pacing around the control room. If this energy becomes too unstable, it could tear Earth apart or worse, become a weapon the Revenants could use against us. Back in space, the Exodus and its fleet began to regroup. The Revenants' retreat had bought them time, but the war was far from over. Zoran and the crew had barely begun to recover from the fierce battle when they received new intelligence. The Revenants were already preparing for their next move, and this time, they weren't coming alone. General Arla, the communications officer, spoke urgently. We've intercepted a transmission. It's from the Revenants' command center. They've allied with an unknown force, a race we've never encountered before. They're coming to Earth's orbit, and they're bringing reinforcements. Zoran clenched his fists. An alliance with whom? Arla's face remained grim as she read through the data. We don't know, sir, but these ships are unlike anything we've seen before. The Revenants are getting desperate. Zoran's mind raced. The Revenants' usual arrogance was gone. They had seen humanity's power and realized they couldn't destroy Earth by sheer force alone. Now, they were seeking new allies, new weapons to tip the scales in their favor. It doesn't matter who they've allied with, Zoran said firmly. We'll fight them. Humanity will not be intimidated. The Exodus began to move toward the Revenant stronghold, the warships following closely behind. The human fleet was bruised but not broken. Their weapons were still powered by the ley line energy, and their resolve had never been stronger. As the fleet moved through the vast emptiness of space, Zoran stood in front of the view screen, his eyes locked on the Revenant stronghold in the distance. The stars in the background seemed to shimmer with an eerie light, and for the first time, he realized just how far humanity had come from a primitive, isolated world to the galactic stage. Humanity had proven that they were no longer just survivors. They were now a force to be reckoned with. The hidden alias. The Exodus sailed deeper into the void. General Zoran stood at the helm, eyes locked on the distant horizon. The silence on the bridge was almost deafening as the human fleet followed closely behind, their warships brimming with ley line energy. The battle they had just won had granted humanity a brief reprieve. But Zoran knew that this was only the beginning. The Revenants had retreated for now, but they were not finished. They had already sought help an alliance with an unknown force. A dangerous development that made Zoran uneasy. We've learned all we can from their communications. Arla, the communications officer, said, her voice tight with tension. There's nothing in their records about these new allies, whoever they are. They're keeping their identities hidden, even from the Revenants. Zoran's eyes narrowed. The Revenants had always relied on their sheer power and overwhelming numbers to maintain their position in the galaxy, but this time, they were showing signs of weakness. Seeking allies meant one thing: they couldn't afford to face humanity alone anymore. Any guesses on who they might be? Zoran asked. Though he wasn't sure if he wanted an answer, Arla hesitated before replying. Based on the unknown energy signatures we've detected, it's possible they've found a long-lost galactic empire, one that's been in hiding for millennia. But it's just speculation. We don't have enough data yet. Zoran rubbed his temples, his mind racing. A lost empire? It sounded like a myth. But the galaxy had always been full of secrets, and humanity was just starting to uncover the ancient ley line power that had been hidden for eons. What if the Revenants had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they could control? Back on Earth, Dr. Calloway and his team were working tirelessly to understand the true extent of the ley line's power, the energy coursing through the Earth's core was unpredictable, volatile, and far more dangerous than they had anticipated. While it had given humanity the strength to stand against the Revenants, there was a growing fear among the scientists that the ley line energy might be far more than just a weapon. It might be a curse. Dr. Calloway, one of the younger researchers, said, pulling him from his thoughts. The energy signatures are fluctuating. There's a pattern developing. It's as if the ley lines are reacting to something or someone. Calloway's brow furrowed. What do you mean, reacting? The energy, it's not just coming from Earth's core anymore. It's being amplified, almost as if something is tapping into it from the outside. We've never seen anything like it before. It could be some sort of signal. Calloway stood motionless for a moment. The Revenants' retreat, their alliance with a mysterious force, could it be connected to what was happening beneath their feet? This doesn't feel like coincidence, Calloway muttered under his breath. We need to dig deeper, prepare the probes to track the energy source. If this external force is controlling the ley line energy, we might be dealing with something far more dangerous than the Revenants. Meanwhile, in space, Zoran was preparing for a confrontation with the Revenants and their new allies. The Exodus was still reeling from the damage, but the human fleet was ready. The battle had proven that humanity had the strength to stand toe-to-toe with the galactic giants, but it was clear now that the stakes had been raised. This wasn't just about survival, it was about securing Earth's place in the galaxy. As Zoran paced the command deck, his mind turned back to the mysterious transmission from the Revenants' flagship. The alien force, now allied with the Revenants, had to be stopped, but who were they? Suddenly, the bridge door slid open, and Captain Dorsey stepped in, a concerned expression on her face. General, we've picked up a strange energy signal from the Revenant stronghold. It's the same signature we detected before, only this time it's much stronger. Zoran stopped pacing, his heart racing. What are we dealing with? Dorsey turned to the view screen, where the energy pattern was flashing like a warning light. We've never seen anything like this. It's almost as if the ley lines themselves are being used as a weapon. But the source is not from Earth. Zoran stared at the screen. Could this unknown force be using the ley lines to amplify their power? What if the Revenants weren't the only ones with a secret weapon? Humanity had found the ley lines, but had someone older tapped into it first? We need to find out what's behind this, Zoran said, his voice steady, though his mind was in turmoil. Prepare the fleet for the next phase. We're heading straight for the Revenant stronghold. Whatever this force is, we're going to face it head on. The Exodus and its fleet surged forward, cutting through the stars with purpose. The Revenants and their new allies might have been preparing for their next strike, but humanity was coming for them, united, stronger than before, and ready for whatever secrets the galaxy held. As the fleet moved closer to the enemy stronghold, the battle ahead felt inevitable. Humanity was about to face its biggest challenge yet. But Zoran knew one thing for sure: Earth would not go down without a fight. They had already faced the unknown, and now they would confront whatever lay beyond the stars. Asters, the hidden mastermind. Exodus and its fleet cut through the darkness of space, moving swiftly toward the Revenant's stronghold. General Zoran stood in the command center, watching as the tactical displays flashed across the screens. His mind was focused, but there was an unease that he couldn't shake. The battle was far from over, and now the Revenant's new allies seemed to be far more than just a backup force. They had played their cards well, and humanity was walking right into the trap. But the true question lingered: who were they? Zoran's gaze was fixed on the view of the enemy stronghold growing larger. On the horizon, the Revenant's forces were formidable, but now it was becoming apparent that they had an unknown ally, someone or something that could shift the tides of the conflict with ease. General, Captain Dorsey's voice cut through the silence. We're receiving another transmission from the Revenants. This time, it's encoded. But it's definitely coming from their main command ship. Zoran's pulse quickened. Put it through, Captain. The screen flickered as the Revenant's commander appeared, his face stern and cold as usual. But there was something different in his expression. Now an underlying hint of something more dangerous, something deeper. I see you've made it this far, General Zoran, the commander said, his voice calm but filled with unmistakable malice. But you're walking into a trap. The galaxy has always feared us. But it's you, humanity, that we must truly deal with. Zoran's jaw tightened. What do you want, Revenant? The commander smiled thinly. What we want is simple. The ley line power. It is more than just energy, General. It is a force older than time itself, a force that controls the very fabric of reality. It is not a power to be wielded by mere mortals like you. That's why we've made an alliance. We didn't just seek to defeat you. We sought to understand what humanity has unlocked, and we will control it. It's only a matter of time. Zoran stared at the screen, his mind racing. An alliance. The Revenants were dangerous. Yes, but they had never seemed to seek such depth before. What were they really after, and who was this new ally they had formed a bond with? I won't let you control Earth's power, Zoran said firmly, his voice cold. If you think you can threaten humanity, you're gravely mistaken. The Revenant commander's face darkened. Then prepare yourself, General. Because we're not just coming for Earth anymore, we're coming for everything. The transmission cut off and the room went silent. Zoran could feel the weight of the commander's words. The Revenants had always been ruthless, but now it seemed like they were under the control of something far more dangerous. But what was it? Who had the Revenants allied with, and what was their true agenda? Dorsey turned to Zoran, her face grave. General, the Revenant stronghold is coming into view. They've reinforced their defenses. It's unlike anything we've seen before. They know we're coming. Zoran nodded. Prepare the fleet for battle, but something doesn't add up. The Revenants have never been this careful. They're hiding something. And I don't think they're the only ones pulling the strings. We need to be ready for whatever this new enemy has in store. Back on Earth, Dr. Calloway was deep in the ley line energy chamber, trying to stabilize the unstable power that had been unlocked. His team worked frantically, but the energy was growing wilder by the hour. The core beneath Earth seemed to hum with unpredictable force, responding to some external pull that no one could explain. Dr. Calloway, one of the researchers, said nervously, the energy is fluctuating. We're losing control. It's almost as if something is pulling at something outside the planet. Calloway's eyes widened. He had suspected this, but hearing it confirmed was a shock. The ley line energy had been harnessed by humanity, but now it seemed like it was being manipulated from the outside. Who could be controlling it? We need to figure out who's behind this, Calloway said, his voice urgent. If the Revenants have found a way to tap into this power, we're in grave danger. We need to shut it down before it's too late. But as Calloway turned to his monitors, the energy around him pulsed with an eerie intensity, as though it were aware of the growing threat. Meanwhile, the Exodus and its fleet moves toward the Revenant's stronghold, the massive enemy fortress looming in the distance. The space around them was filled with the debris of previous battles, and as the human fleet advanced, they could feel the Revenants' power gathering, preparing for their final assault. But Zoran knew that something wasn't right. The Revenants had always relied on brute strength and intimidation, but now they were using something far more subtle, something with the potential to change the fate of the entire galaxy. Captain Dorsey, Zoran said, his voice calm but filled with resolve. We need to be ready for anything. The Revenants might be distracting us, but this new force, the one behind them, might have even more terrifying plans. Dorsey nodded, her eyes sharp with focus. Understood, sir. We're prepared for whatever comes next. Zoran's eyes darkened as he watched the fleet move closer to the stronghold. The battle for Earth was far from over. It was only just beginning, and the true enemy was still in the shadows, waiting to make their move. The hidden power of the Revenant's stronghold loomed ahead, a vast, heavily fortified station at the center of a dead, desolate sector of space. It was a symbol of their dominance, a fortress that had withstood countless sieges. But now, as Zoran and the Exodus neared, the cold emptiness surrounding it felt strangely foreboding. He had faced many threats before, but something about this felt different. The tension in the air wasn't just the weight of an impending battle, it was the presence of an unseen force. General, Captain Dorsey called, her voice steady but laced with a rare edge of urgency. We've picked up strange energy readings around the stronghold. It's not from the Revenant's fleet, it's something else, it's pulsing. Zoran's heart skipped a beat. They had been expecting a fight, but this was something new. Something more dangerous. The Revenants had always been brutal. But now they had an unknown power at their side, one that had been feeding off the ley line. Energy humanity had unlocked. But what was it, and how could they fight something they couldn't even see? I don't like the sound of this, Zoran muttered. He turned to Dorsey, prepare for a full scan. We need to know exactly what we're up against before we engage. The Exodus' sensors hummed to life and the crew worked quickly, pulling up data and analyzing the readings. There was something alien, something ancient, hidden beneath the stronghold, pulsing with energy. It was unlike any technology or force they had ever encountered. It's coming from beneath the surface, Arla, the communications officer, said, her voice tight with apprehension. This energy isn't from the Revenant's weapons or ships. It's from something much older, something buried. Zoran stared at the data, a cold chill creeping down his spine. What were they about to unleash? The Revenant's secret weapon was far more than just advanced ships and tactics. They had harnessed something ancient, something that was now making its presence known. This is bigger than anything we thought, Zoran said under his breath. The Revenants aren't just fighting for power, they're tapping into something they can't control on the surface of Earth. Dr. Calloway had been watching the unfolding conflict from his underground lab. He had been tracking the ley line energy's fluctuations, and his worst fears were coming true. The Revenant's unknown ally was interfering with the very fabric of the energy source that had empowered humanity's fleet, and as the conflict escalated, the ley lines were reacting more violently. As though they were alive, Calloway ran his fingers over the readings, his mind racing. The Revenant's weapon wasn't just a conventional tool of destruction. They were using the ley lines like a harnessed force, amplifying it, reshaping it, and now it was beginning to break free from their control. We need to shut it down. Calloway muttered to himself, the energy, if we don't contain it, it could tear apart everything, Earth, the galaxy, everything. The ley lines had been dormant for millennia, but humanity had awoken something dangerous within them. The Revenant's alliance with this mysterious force had only intensified the power, and now it was spiraling out of control. Activate the containment protocols, Calloway shouted, moving quickly across the lab to his control station. We can't let this power spread any further. We're running out of time back in space. The Exodus and its fleet had finally arrived at the Revenant stronghold, its massive fortress station sitting ominously in the dark expanse. Zoran's ship moved into position, the surrounding space filled with debris from the previous battles. The alien ships, remnants of the Revenant's fleet, were scattered like broken toys. But there was still no sign of the enemy. Where were they? All ships, report in. Zoran's voice crackled through the comms, his eyes scanning the area. We're heading into the heart of their territory. Stay sharp. As the fleet advanced, Zoran's instincts told him that something was wrong. The Revenant stronghold was eerily silent. No defensive fire, no ships in the vicinity, nothing. It was as if the enemy had been waiting for them to arrive. I don't like this. Dorsey spoke in a low voice. It's too quiet. They know we're here. Why aren't they attacking? Before Zoran could respond, the ship shuddered. A massive shockwave hit them like a slap, throwing the Exodus into a brief spin. Lights flickered, alarms rang out, and Zoran's heart raced. Shields up, Zoran barked, regaining control of the ship. What the hell was that? Arla quickly checked the sensors. It came from beneath the surface of the stronghold. It's a massive energy pulse. The Revenants weren't just defending their station, they've activated something. Something we can't even detect properly. Zoran's eyes went wide. It's the energy, he said. Realization dawning. The Revenants weren't just trying to take Earth, they were trying to control the ley lines, and now they've opened a door to something far more dangerous. As the shockwave cleared, the Exodus and its fleet found themselves face to face with the Revenant's secret weapon. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't an army. It was something far more terrifying, a dark energy swirling in a massive vortex. Beneath the stronghold, the ley line energy was alive, and it was growing by the second. Feeding off the battle, feeding off the fear, feeding off the power that had been unleashed. Zoran looked at the vortex, his pulse quickening. We can't let this thing reach full power, he said. It will destroy everything. Prepare to fire everything we have. We've got to stop this now. The crew scrambled, weapons charging, and the Exodus took aim at the dark energy rising from the depths of the Revenant stronghold. The awakening of the Korath energy vortex beneath the Revenant stronghold seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, sending ripples of intense power through the galaxy. It wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was a force, one that couldn't be tamed. The ley line energy had become an entity of its own, and humanity's initial discovery had awakened something ancient and terrifying. Zoran and his fleet had just scratched the surface of a cosmic power they had no understanding of. And now, it was too late to turn back. General Zoran, the vortex, it's growing exponentially. Arla's voice trembled as she looked at the readouts. The energy output is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's alive, General. Zoran's jaw clenched. He had seen galaxies burn, armies fall, and enemies cower before humanity's strength. But this was something else entirely. Humanity had unlocked a power that was neither theirs to control nor theirs to conquer. It was an ancient force that had existed before even the revenants, an entity so vast that even the Galactic Council had no knowledge of it. The Exodus shuddered again as the vortex's power surged. Zoran's hand gripped the armrest of his seat, his mind working furiously. They needed to stop it, but how? Their most advanced weapons were already charging. Yet the vortex seemed to absorb the blasts as if they were nothing more than a flicker of light. Fire everything, Zoran shouted, his voice desperate. He wasn't about to sit back and watch the Revenant's scheme unravel humanity's future. The Exodus's weapons unleashed a barrage of ley line-enhanced fire. The beams connecting with the vortex. Light and darkness clashed, and for a moment, it seemed like the Exodus might actually make a difference. But then, something even more terrifying happened. The vortex shifted. It began pulling the energy back in, growing stronger, the force becoming intelligent, adapting. It was alive like a massive, pulsating heart, drawing power from the Exodus's own weapons and the ley line energy they had used. Zoran's eyes widened. It's feeding on us, he said under his breath. It's feeding on the energy from the fleet. Dorsey's voice cut through the tension. General, we need to shut down the weapon systems. It's just amplifying the vortex. We're going to overload the fleet if we keep firing. But Zoran wasn't listening. The vortex was still growing, and with each passing second, it was becoming stronger, more unpredictable. Humanity had awakened a sleeping giant. And the consequences of that awakening were now shattering the galaxy. We need to break its connection to the core, Zoran said, his voice tight. Get me the best energy experts from Earth. We need to find a way to disconnect this thing from the ley lines or we'll lose everything. On Earth, Dr. Calloway's team was in a frenzy. The ley line chamber was vibrating with energy, the walls groaning under the sheer force they had unleashed. The power surge was building at an alarming rate, and the core beneath them seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. We're losing control. The power's escalating, a technician shouted, his hands flying over the control panels. The once harnessed ley line energy was now spiraling beyond their control. Calloway's face was pale as he stared at the screens, watching the raw chaos unfold. He had always known the ley lines were dangerous. But this was something beyond his comprehension. The Revenants had come for power. But they didn't know they were unleashing an ancient beast, something that could destroy not just humanity but everything. Shut it down. Calloway barked at the technicians. We've got to stop it before the energy tears this planet apart. If we can't contain this force, Earth is finished. But even as the containment protocols were engaged, it was clear. The beast, the ley line entity, was no longer something they could control. It had become its own unstoppable force, back on the Exodus. Zoran stood with his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his mind working furiously. They were running out of time. The Revenant's fleet had disappeared, but this new threat was far more dangerous. The ley line vortex had already begun to destabilize the surrounding systems. The energy output from the vortex was tearing through space, distorting time and reality in its wake. The Exodus had taken massive damage. But they could still fight. Humanity could still fight. The galaxy needed to be saved. Get the human fleet ready for a final strike. Prepare for a direct assault on the core, Zoran commanded. General, there's a new signal coming from the Revenants, Arla reported. They've started launching a new wave of attacks. They've come back with reinforcements. Zoran's gaze hardened. The Revenants were desperate. They had returned, bringing more forces with them, but humanity wasn't finished. They had made their stand. Now was the time for their greatest test. Prepare for the final assault. Zoran said again, his voice calm, yet unwavering. Humanity will end this now. We won't run from this fight.